Okay, here we go. I'm going to change my view to... Weird, I can see you, but I can't see me. Usually I can see us side by side. Anyway, here we are again for episode whatever.
Is it something I should be clicking on, or did I screw up? Well,
Nope, I think we're fine. It's just usually I see you and me side by side, but this time I'm seeing me up in the corner and you down there, but I don't think it matters. So...
that didn't work.
All right, so we're ready. We're recording. We've been recording, listening to me blab about stuff. So now we're going to listen to you. So we're going to talk about New Orleans.
Yeah. And I'll keep on going since in the Pine Lake one, we have been talking about the racial tensions in that area.
Yeah.
Very, very, very different culture and very different scene in New Orleans. Let's see, I was living with Cami Moniz and her daughter, and her daughter Harmony went to a school that a woman named Gloria Furman was running. And so we moved into the neighborhood, which was the 8th Ward, formerly the Faubourg des Allemands, when it had a lot of the people from the border between France and Germany there.
Huh.
You know, Alsace-Lorraine, do you know anything about that?
The words sound familiar, but I couldn't tell you.
It's a disputed territory between the France and Germany, and I spoke to one woman who was the mayor of a town there, and she told me that yeah, they did have to change languages, that they spoke a couple of times over there.
Says it was a territory created by the German Empire in 1871 after it annexed most of Alsace, the Moselle department of Lorraine, following its victory in the Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah.
Huh.
But okay, where was I going with that?
You moved into this place.
Oh yeah, they had great bakeries. But the neighborhood that I lived in was called the Faubourg des Allemands. That you know, that translate as the German neighborhood.
Huh.
So even though they were German, they were part of the colonization. They were part of the French community, whether they liked it or not.
Okay.
And after that, you know, we're going back into the 1900s. As the Germans moved on, the area filled up with free people of color. Now, this is something that they had a lot of in the North, but they did in Louisiana, where it was a little bit easier to get emancipated, or you know, to be freed by the master, whatever.
Right.
One of the things that made the New Orleans society so coherent or cohesive were the, I guess, sexual practices. On the English plantations, the master may take advantage of the female slave, and the offspring would typically, with any luck, end up as a butler or overseer or house servant. You know, is it
Right.
something other than laboring in the fields? So, however, with the French are a little bit friendlier, so they the planters would live out of town, but the young planters would move into New Orleans for the winter season after the crops were done, and they were kind of expected to select a mistress from the quadroon balls. Do you know what the quadroons are?
Yeah.
Most of the people that I worked with in New Orleans, in a like 300 something people office, were from that culture.
Mm.
So they ended up with a good education, which their English-owned counterparts did not get. So they're like just nice French Catholic people with a tar brush.
Mm.
The oh I can't remember the name of it, but there was one great book that I'll try to recall about the life of people growing up in that situation.
Mm.
But what it meant was that you couldn't be too mad at the emancipated slaves, because they might be your cousin.
Yeah.
Just a different colonial attitude that the French would kind of incorporate, the English would conquer.
Right.
So anyway, have you been to New Orleans?
I have not. No.
Canal Street was the main avenue that divided the neighborhoods after the Americans settled in. The Americans were upstream from Canal Street. The French were downstream, and there was a big median strip on the boulevard called the neutral ground, because that's where French and English people would meet to do business.
Interesting. Huh. And what time frame was this in? When were you there? What years?
80s, I think.
Mm. So still in the 80s, it's very.
Yeah, I graduated from college around 80, and I attempted to work for the IRS in Louisiana. It didn't take long before we both agreed that wasn't a great idea.
Yeah.
So I put my tail between my legs and went into New Orleans and started working at DePaul Mental Hospital, which was a fancy old place with high brick walls and the live oak trees leaning over. It was on Audubon Park, very nice neighborhood uptown.
Sanitarium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a popular place for New Orleanians to detox from too much partying, or
to get a rest.
Yeah, go away for a while when they had wigged out.
Yeah.
So I got to learn about how how the people in that area go crazy and what's done about it. But let's see, from that job, I gotten as far as I could in that job with a psych degree. I was kind of a lead worker, and I was noticing that some of the people that I was supervising were people with like master's degrees from local colleges, and all I had was a bachelor's. So I said, I am never going to get anywhere. I teach them how to do it, and then they run things.
Yeah.
Let's see. Or I get drifting off thinking about particular people and their issues.
Yeah.
So what I realized when I started looking at the pay grades was that nurses were in charge, and they were getting much more money than people like me were. So I said, well, okay.
I'll be a nurse.
So I enrolled in the Toro Infirmary School of Nursing. That was a hospital that was established so that Jewish doctors would have a place to practice. It was a very segregated atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it was the first hospital that would admit blacks and whites and have them on the same floor and everything. This was shocking, but
Wow.
It didn't seem to bother the Jewish doctors or administrators.
Huh.
So it was a friendly social place. You know who Aaron Neville is?
I know the name. Why do I know that name?
The Neville brothers. I think he was going out with Linda Ronstadt at one point.
Yeah, R&B guy. Yeah. Okay. Was he there?
Yeah, he looks tough, but he was a nice guy. To keep fired up to play these clubs, to really put yourself out too. Sometimes folks need an extra boost, maybe some cocaine or whatever, and
Yeah.
and that was a professional hazard. People, musicians would do that to keep up their energy, but they'd occasionally crash.
You'd have to eventually, yeah.
So DePaul was set up to help them crash and rehabilitate and get back on the road again.
Interesting.
I met some interesting people there too. Okay, and then so I started going to Turo School of Infirmary, and it ended up working on the floor there with some of the first AIDS patients when all the people knew was that it was contagious and it killed you, but they didn't know how it was spread or how to fix it.
Right. Back at the very beginning, yeah.
And I was the new guy. So, you take care of this patient, will you please?
Yeah. Ow.
So from there, I ended up getting on an AIDS task force. And they carried over into the next job that I had, adjudicating disability claims. But what I found out with the hospitals, I was underpaid relatively. Where are they going? Oh, so anyway, I'm missing some pieces, but I ended up moving from uptown to downtown into the past the French Quarter into the. It's called by various things. The old name was the Faubourg Marinais. The real estate name for it is the Bywater. That sounds a little classier.
Mm. Why did you move?
My partner Cammie had a child in preschool, and and we found an apartment near the school.
Ah, okay.
Which put it down in the 8th Ward there, or the St. Roch neighborhood on Music Street. It's just kind of it was a very friendly neighborhood. The director of the school that Cammie's daughter was going to was Gloria Furman. She's an educator, really bright and compassionate person. And we got to be pretty good friends. She had an episode of sickle cell, and I helped bail her out with her financial needs. So we were on pretty friendly terms. And she would hook me up with other social connections. I missed out a chapter someplace in there before I ended up in New Orleans. I was trying to recover from the 60s myself with the excess of sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah. Time to slow down a little bit.
Oh, so I looked around, and the sanest people that I knew were the Quakers in the peace movement. So I started going to Quaker meeting, and ended up being the clerk of the Quaker meeting in New Orleans. It isn't a formal ministry, but how they arrive at decisions is that people are sitting around in a circle, and they speak as the Spirit moves them. And the purpose of the clerk is to step in at one point and say, well, it looks to me like the sense of the meeting is that we're going to defer going ahead on this project, you know.
Right, just kind of gather the general consensus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see. So that was nice. As the clerk, I was a kind of emissary of the meeting, which was committed to peace. So I ended up going to meetings for the Committee in Solidarity with the people of El Salvador, and the Catholic Pax Christi, and New Orleans Nicaraguan Solidarity Organization.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would imagine too, after, some lengthy time of such excess, that because we're always trying to get back to the middle, right?
Yeah.
You gotta, that kind of peaceful thing is like balm to your soul after you've had so much excess, right? So you're kind of trying to find your way to a middle ground.
Yeah, I was trying basically to restore my sanity. But what their meetings are is basically a centering meditation, but that they all do it together, and there's a kind of a group mind that develops a telepathy. People get on the same wavelength, and it forms a good bonding even without uh, a lot of formal stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always associated Quakers with like the Amish, but it's not, right? Is it the same
No,
sort of life principles or?
it developed independently, but there's similarities because they're both peace churches.
Yeah. Yeah, the Quakers were the ones who opted out of enlisting in a lot of
Yeah.
conflicts, right? Because of
Yeah.
their beliefs. Yeah.
So there was usually a Mennonite mission going on in town, and they'd send a few young people down and try to do whatever their version of good works was, in the orphanage or something like,
Yeah.
uh, that they were nice folks. And since there really wasn't a Mennonite meeting in town, they show up at the Quaker meeting as the kind of next best thing.
Right.
If you have to go someplace else, the Quakers aren't too bad.
Right. Huh.
And of course, I discovered that that when the college age Mennonites would come down to do their service, that they were pretty much like any other college people hitting New Orleans. They would
Yeah.
they would be distracted from their cause.
Yeah.
I lost a good pair of handcuffs and a straitjacket to that crowd.
Those it's been my experience personally too that the teenage religious crowd is sometimes worse in many ways than the non-religious teenage crowd.
Yeah. Oh, plus this was their period away from home, so it was finite. They
Yeah.
weren't they weren't
Kind of
going
like the Amish have Rumspringa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
That's pretty. They were either on missions or on Rumspring, and anyway, we got to socialize with a lot of these very, very sweet people.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated by that idea of you have this. I mean, it still feels very safe in a way, I guess, because it's a limited time,
Yeah.
and within these constraints, you have the freedom to explore as much as you're comfortable with, right?
Yeah. What I found was that their internal boundaries were tough enough that they didn't end up getting into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm in a mixed neighborhood, predominantly black. The descendants of free people of color. And boy, you could get a great oyster po' boy down at the local grocery store.
Yeah. I can imagine. Food must have been fantastic.
My work was several blocks away on Canal Street, or two neighborhoods down. There was Canal, and then there were Treme. There was a TV movie made about or a TV series made about Treme. When people go to the French Quarter, and they'll usually be warned not to cross this certain avenue because that'll take you into Treme, and that's a terrible neighborhood.
Yeah.
I didn't think so. Uh, and Gloria hooked me up with, I had a little Ford Courier pickup. So one carnival time, the neighborhoods or the neighbors decorated that and put on their finery, and we were part of the Treme Carnival Parade, which is one of, there's many carnival parades. It isn't just Zulu and Rex down Canal Street. There's a lot of neighborhood ones.
Yeah.
And this was a neighborhood one, but since this was the neighborhood that a lot of the musicians came from, there were great bands and great music.
Wow. Yeah, I bet that in the heyday, that was amazing.
Yeah.
So you got to, were you driving the pickup or were you just?
I got to be the driver. What I found out in New Orleans in the race relations area is that, so they look at reality there. The white people usually end up with more money than the black people do. So in Carnival, they do the thing where the affluent people ride up on the floats, and the poor people say, "Throw me something, miss," or "Throw me, give me some pittance."
Right, share the wealth.
It's an elevated form of begging.
Interesting. Is that where the whole beads thing came from?
Pardon me?
Is that where the whole beads thing came from? Mardi Gras beads?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. While I was driving, I had a big stack of beads next to me, and I tossed them out when I had a chance. In fact, last night I was just looking at the wholesale prices on used Carnival beads. That they're really quite reasonable.
Yeah, you can get a bunch of stuff like that. Yeah, I've looked for some reason. I can't remember why, but I have looked before too. Interesting. Well, we're about at the end of half an hour. Got any big ideas for next week?
I can do more next week.
Okay,
I haven't gotten to the good stuff. There's an island called Villa Ashby, which is down at the end of the Mississippi River, which was kind of a hippie commune.
Ah,
You could only get to it by boat.
Interesting. Well, let's say that for next week.
Very good.
And yeah, same time, same place next week.
Very good. Thank you so much.
See ya.